Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I have for you a comprehensive guide for my Skeleton Archer build. It's a Skeleton Archer plus Spectre hybrid. It's a Summoner build and it is a bossing build. Despite being a bossing build, the clear is pretty pleasurable. You don't even need to switch any gems. You could switch GMP and Feeding Frenzy if you wanted to, but it's actually not even necessary. It's a very powerful bossing build. It's a squishy build. I'm gonna add a disclaimer in the beginning, right here, right now. This is a very squishy build. This has, like, I have barely capped my resistances. It has 4k health. I still am re-rolling a couple of items for better health, but I am sacrificing basically all defense for damage, and you can see how much damage it deals. It is melting bosses. It is the most damage I've ever had on a build. It is the most single target damage I've ever had on a build. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Obviously it's designed to be a boss killer. The build that I have currently is very high budget. Keep that in mind. This can work on a low budget because this is of course a summoner build with skeletons and specters. You can do that on a budget, no problem. However, it's not gonna be as insane as you can see on the footage in this video. Let me start off by talking about the main skills of the build. How are we dealing damage? Then I'm going to talk about how are we scaling the damage, the debuffs and the auras. Then I'm going to talk about the gems and how the hell do we manage to fit all of the gems in this build, because it's quite incredible how much we fit in it. Then I'm going to talk about the rest of the gear, how to craft some of the important pieces of gear, flasks, cluster jewels, and passives. So let's start, like I said, with the main skills. The main skill that we're using, there are two main skills because it's kind of a hybrid, but the main premise, I wanted to make a phantasmal summon skeletons build, which is phantasmal is the alternate quality of the gem that allows you to summon skeleton archers. So the skeleton archers are these dudes that we summon here. I can currently summon up to 11. You could summon like up to 13 if you wanted to, but this is the current cap that I have with the amount of gear. This is like the most damage probably that we can have. The skeletons stay, they don't follow you, you cannot convocate them to you, so you'd think that this would be like very bad at clearing, right? However, you'll see in some of the footage from like clearing the maps. I should probably put at the end of the video like a full map run with like a guardian or something so that you can see that. It clears very well because of the specters. We have anomalous race specter here. The specters that we are running are syndicate operatives, which are incredible. So phantasmal skeleton and the race specter with syndicate operatives takes care of the business very well. The main links for the skeletons are Divergent Predator. The Divergent Predator is extremely good. It gives you increased crit chance and crit multiplier. It is by far the most damage you can get from a support gem in here. So Divergent Predator, very important, and we use the same thing in the specters as well for our single target damage. I run with this non-stop here. I don't bother switching that out because it's just like so much damage. It's really crazy, and besides that, you can just like run through the map and the specters will clear everything. You don't even need to summon the skeletons, but whenever you do, you're mostly doing it for the single target damage. Then we have awakened minion damage. Then we have awakened cold penetration because we're dealing all cold damage. Then we have awakened elemental damage with attacks, and then we have awakened vicious projectiles. So all of these support the summon skeletons. And then for specters, we have the helmet. The helmet that I crafted, it could be even better. Keep in mind, this is very high investment. This is like 300 to 400x invested into this build. However, there are still improvements to be made, such as this helmet. The helmet could have +3 to the level of summon and minion gems. The reason why I don't have a better helmet right now is because it's very hard to hit it with an essence, because I am essence crafting it also for reduced mana reserved, so that I can fit another big aura in the build in the form of haste. We're also fitting haste in this. With Val haste is absolutely insane amount of damage, but that's the reason why I don't have it, because it's just like super hard, because you need to hit the +3 to level of socketed minion gems, as well as socketed gems are supported by minion damage, ideally like level 20. But we have the +2 to the gems, so we're missing like 1 level on the specters. We have the minion damage, we have the hypothermia, we have the crit chance, minion damage, which comes from the support gem, increased effect of cold ailments, which comes from the hypothermia, 5% reduced mana reserved, which comes from an essence, and then we have also +1 to number of skeletons that we can summon. Alternatively, you could replace the +1 to skeletons if you wanted less single target damage. It's absolutely not necessary, and you could have instead of that just like a tier 1 life roll or something. And then we have it on a bone helmet base for the minion damage, as well as summon. Skitterbots has 20% reduced mana reservation. The reason why is because this is actually better than the 15% for hatred and haste, because these will reserve, right now they reserve, what is it, 25% mana, 36% mana, but the haste even, like the haste and the hatred, they reserve 50% mana, but we are like reducing that, and we're not adding any supports that increase the mana reservation. However, with Skitterbots, we are adding Bone Chill, which increase the mana reservation cost, which pushes the enchant for Skitterbots to actually save us more mana than the enchant for hatred, for example. So that's why this is the best enchant if you want to fit all of the curses. So that's for the specters, right? So those are the supports here, including also Awakened GMP, Awakened Vicious Projectiles, and Divergent Predator. So those are the supports, because you have to keep in mind that the helmet gives some of the support, so it's like a 7-link or whatever helmet for specters, which is the best thing you can do for specters, running them in the helmet. And then we have this also. I forgot to mention the most important part. It's supported by level 15 Pierce, which gives us like 15% more damage or like 16% more damage, and triple Pierce, so we can hit multiple targets. It's very, very good for clear. It's very, very good for single target damage. It's as well like a 7-link. The only problem with this is that it's very hard to hit the required stats. It's very, very hard to hit the stats. And I mean, if you don't want to like put any points into these passives, which we are not. I have not allocated a single point into just like passive that gives us stats. I have made choices that I pick like strength and dex here on the way to this, instead of anointing it and using like a jewel to grab Ravenous Horde or something. So I'm making choices to get more strength and dex on the tree, but I'm never like just picking strength and dex for nothing else, right? We are making sure to pick on the small passives, we got like all attributes and strength. We got here like all attributes strength, like strength dex. We get an enchant that gives us strength. We got jewels that gives us strength and dex. This one I think also is giving me strength, minion damage, and all res. And also I should put like 7% life on that, just with augment life. But I'm gonna talk about these jewels in a bit. So those are like the main links. Other than that, we have the Skitterbots with Bone Chill, with Divergent Bone Chill, which is like the most damage you can have from that. Basically, the chill that Skitterbots apply will increase the damage that you're dealing, right? So that will add to like the increased damage taken for the enemies. And then we're running the two big auras, which are Hatred and Haste. Hatred and Haste both are level 25 for me. They're level 25 because I have +1 level to all spell skill gems from the wand, and then we have +2 to level of socketed aura gems from this. That is +2, +1, and then +1 from support because of Awakened Generosity. Awakened Generosity from level 5, it starts giving, I think, +1 to level of supported aura skill gems. And then because of the boots, having the corruption, Awakened Generosity is also level 8 right now. So this gives us a massive increase to the effect. So in here, Enlighten level 4, just so that we can fit all of that. So we are fitting the Skitterbots, Hatred, and Haste, and also we have Summon Carrion Golem, which I should have Divergent here, or Anomalous, whichever one is increased buff effect as well. So these auras are massive. We're running Windscreen Boots because we need the extra curse. So other than buffing our damage with the auras, we're also increasing our damage with the curses. So one curse comes from the Triad Grip being corrupted with Elemental Weakness. One curse comes from the curse enemies with frostbite on hit from the ring, and 1 curse comes from us self-casting the sniper's mark, which is sitting here at level 22 at 44% quality, which makes enemies take 48% increased damage from projectile hits, so almost 50% more damage just from that curse alone. And then we have the other 2 curses, right? And this is very, very good for a single target, like extremely powerful. So these curses come from the ring, from this, and we are applying them with the Armageddon brand. So Armageddon brand hits a target, and we are applying 2 curses from this, and then we're applying also our normal curse from Sniper's Mark, and the Armageddon brand itself will also of course apply Elemental Equilibrium, which will further reduce the cold resistance of our enemies by 50%, which is, we're just like doubling the damage, doubling the damage, doubling the damage. It's just insane amount of damage from these debuffs. That's why there's a little bit of a ramp up. Like basically when you fight a boss, you will like stack your skills, you will do your intimidating cry. I'm gonna explain that in a moment, but basically by the time all of your debuffs hit, which would take like 1 second, the boss, like a Conqueror, will be already dead. Like the Conqueror will die in less than 1 second very often, and you're not gonna be able to even put the Sniper's Mark or Signal Prey on. Like you'll put it on and then it instantly dies like half a second after that. So it's even very hard to put these on in time, but that's what we're doing. So other than that, in terms of the gems, we also have Animate Guardian in the ring because of the fact that this is essentially a Spectre build. Like this has everything that a Spectre build would have, plus on top of that we are fitting an extra 50% reservation aura. We're fitting haste on top of that compared to like regular Spectre build, and on top of that, on top of all, we're fitting 7 Link Phantasmal Skeletons. So how the hell are we getting the gems to do all of that? We're using the Hungry Loop. So in the Hungry Loop, we are running our Animate Guardian. This allows us to have the Animate Guardian be super beefy. It has never died. I did all of the fights in the game. I literally did all of the fights in the game. I did all of the invitations, which I will be showing in this video, either beginning or the end. I did Uber Elder, I did everything you can imagine, Cyrus 9. The Animate Guardian has never died. The Animate Guardian is supported by Feeding Frenzy, and here's the thing, it's supported by Feeding Frenzy because we are not always running Feeding Frenzy in the Spectre thing, right? Sometimes we're running Feeding Frenzy, like for clear, it's nice to run Feeding Frenzy, or for certain content that you want to like kind of AFK on, it's nice to run the Feeding Frenzy on the Spectres, but if we're not, then the Feeding Frenzy will come from the Animate Guardian killing something. And then we have the Meat Shield, which gives it the defensive behavior, and it overrides the aggressive behavior from Feeding Frenzy, which means the Animate Guardian will always be defensive if you have those two. Then we also have Elemental Army, so the Animate Guardian has more resistances, has maximum, I think it also gives you like to the +2 to max res, and it also applies 10% elemental exposure. For the most damage it deals comes from cold, so it applies 10% cold exposure as well. That's again 10% more damage for our skeletons and our specters. It's insane. And then we have level 20 minion life because we want to have as tanky as possible this Animate Guardian. In terms of the items, it has, obviously, as you can see, the Kingmaker, right? It has the Kingmaker on him, which gives us the Fortify. It gives us also Calling Strike, Rarity, and Crit Multiplier to all of the enemies, or all of the allies that are affected by him. On top of that, it has the Mask of the Stitched Demon, which gives him regen per ES. And then on the chest, he has like resistances. So like on the chest and gloves, he has resist. So it's like 40 something of each res. And then on top of that, on the chest, there's also a craft that gives him 10% of his health as extra energy shield, which makes it so that he regens that, because the Mask of the Stitched Demon takes the energy shield, and instead of gaining ES, you gain a regen. So he has insane amount of regen with insane health pool. And then on top of that, the chest also has nearby enemies are blinded, which means if we are close to the boss is also blinded, which is a massive layer of defense for me, since I have almost no layers of defense on the character otherwise. On the boots, we have, I think it's like max roll T1 chaos res, and also like elemental plus chaos res craft, so as much chaos res as we can, and I think like percentage to dodge attack hits or something like that. Flat life is irrelevant, you only want percentage life. That's why we have the gloves, the unique gloves. I think it's not called, what's it called? There are unique gloves that give you like 16% maximum life. I'm going to show it on the screen, and they also give you like cold rest. So that's what we're using on the Animate Guardian. Then these gems here in the Triad grip, of course we're using Triad grip. This is the way to scale the damage. This is what most modern minion builds rely on. Like if you want to make a very strong minion build that uses like generic attacks or projectiles that deal mostly physical damage, then we can convert that all with Triad grip to cold by having 4 green sockets in here. And because of that, we're forced to use green gems in those. We cannot just make it white and put whatever gem, it has to be green. So we are using in here dash with the second wind and with enhance, and the enhance is also linked to the sniper's mark, which means the sniper's mark has increased quality, which is very important because that gives us like cursed enemies take increased damage taken from projectile hits. So instead of 5% we get 11 on top of the curse effect. Massive damage increase. And then we have heal flesh offering with desecrate. So on the trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. On the one with trigger we have the Armageddon brand, which will apply our curses and exposure, and we have desecrate with flesh offering so that minions can have increased movement and cast speed. And as we are running through the map, this constantly keeps happening and keeps being used. Then we have another skill. We have, because of the fact that like we are so gem starved, right? We need to like fit 7 link and a 7 link here, and then we also need to have all of these extra skills. We have an unset rank with convocation. That's where our convocation is sitting. And then we also have a couple of skills coming from outside of that, from outside of our gear. We have a skill from this passive, the Bone Barrier, which gives us extra 2.2k life shield, and this also gives us that shield to the minions, so the minions are even more tanky. And then we also have Intimidating Cry, which is located on our belt. So you need a Shaper base, so ideally you can get like a Shaper and a Hunter base for like percentage max life, and then Intimidating Cry from that. The reason why we have Intimidating Cry is so that number one, we can apply Intimidate to the enemies, which is 10% increased damage taken from attacks for them. And then on top of that, we also have this node, which is a lead by example, that whenever you Warcry, it gives you and your allies onslaught. So you do that whenever a boss appears, you do that, and then basically you gain onslaught, all of your minions gain onslaught, and it's a massive multiplier to your damage with the just huge increase to your attack and movement speed. Very powerful. And the best way to get the leader by example is on a Megalomaniac. So I recommend searching for Megalomaniac with lead by example and then some kind of a minion node. I happen to be able to snipe this one. I searched for a bunch of them. This is like the only one available. It's very hard to get Megalomaniac with something good, so you can just get a medium jewel. But if you cannot get the Megalomaniac, it's probably better to just stick to regular medium jewels. But if you can get one, it is massive damage increase. Not to mention that it also gives you strength and dexterity for some reason, which is exactly what your build is starving for. So this is an amazing node. And then we have renewal with it, which is like double damage for minions and minion life regen. And then peak vigor, which is like 8% max life. A very good nodes to have together. So that's basically the gem setup. When it comes to the gear, some of the pieces of the gear are very easy, right? Like the Lion Eyes, very easy. Ideally, you'd enchant that with strength or life, depending on what you need more. We needed the strength, so I enchanted this with the strength. Then we have the Wind Scream. Again, you don't need Wind Shriek because the AoE of your curses does not matter. So ideally, you get one with +2 to level of socketed aura gems, and that's where you put your auras. This is not that expensive. Like, how much is it with the +2 to auras? Let's see. With +2 to auras, okay, 9 chaos, 10 chaos, 30 chaos, depending on how much resist it has on it, I guess, right? But you want to have as high resist as you can, because you are also very resist starved. It's very hard to cap your resist because of all the stuff that you need to run. So Lion Eyes Vision for the 7 link for summon skeletons, then Wind Scream, then Triad Grip with elemental weakness if you can. How much is it with elemental weakness? With elemental weakness, it costs 20 chaos, 40 chaos, 1 exalted, very cheap. very cheap considering how powerful it is for the build. And then Hungry Loop, which is like a 1C unique. You just need to make sure that you put all of the gems. The way you fill the Hungry Loop with your supports is you have a support gem that is at level 19, and you can buy them at level 19 and a bunch of XP, and then you level it, and then you do not click the plus on the right side. Instead, you put it in the gem, equip it, and then you click the plus. Leveling it to level 20, that's what makes it consume the gem, and that's what makes the support gem get into the item, and then you can put another one, and then you put your main gem that is going to be supported by all of those. Then the next piece of gear, I guess, would be the wand. The wand is something that I still want to improve. This is a fairly cheap wand that I got at the beginning when I was getting started with the character. It's still a very good wand, but it can be much better. I can have like the temple mod with double damage. Like, keep in mind the damage of this build is already insane, but it still could be doubled if I made more investment into it. But you want a wand with +1 to level of all spell skill gems, +1 to level of all minion gems, and then as much minion damage and attack speed as you can fit on it, and trigger socketed spell when you use a skill. That's the important part. Then for the helmet, you want the Spectre helmet. There are many guides. You can check out Gazi's guide for crafting a helmet. However, for this build, I recommend going for the reduced mana reserved if you have the budget. The way you do that is you spam an essence. Let me see, which one was that? There's an essence that gives you mana reservation. Is it this one? Loathing? Helmet, yes. So Essence of Loathing, you want the Deafening Essence of Loathing, and you basically spam Deafening Essence of Loathing, which guarantees the reduced mana reserve until you get +3 to level of socketed minion gems, and socketed gems are supported by a level 20 minion damage. That would be the ideal 2 rolls to hit. And then on top of that, you're going to basically and you're doing that on an Elder Shaper base, right, of whatever helmet you have with an enchant, ideally summon Skitterbots. And then what you do is basically make sure your prefixes are filled, because one of the prefixes is going to be the level of minion gems, one prefix is going to be the minion damage, and then you basically augment cold, augment crit, and you're guaranteed to hit hypothermia and crit. And then you can just, like, if you don't hit the tier 1, you can just remove add cold, remove add crit, and then you put either life or +1 zombies as a craft. Very, very simple helmet, but very costly because you have to spam a lot of essences to hit the right mods on it, but very easy to craft. The next piece of gear is an amulet, which is fairly easy to craft. I still have to divine this because I was divining it for the res, which lowered my mana reservation, but that's okay. The way you craft this is you get a base, which is a citrine amulet, either Redeemer or Hunter, whatever is cheaper. Let's say you got a Redeemer amulet that is at least, I think, level 84 or 85, and then you make sure to put Hatred, reduced mana reservation on it, and no other influence mods. And then you get a Hunter amulet with +1 to level of all intelligence skill gems, no other influence mods on it. You Awakener Orb, the bad one, right, the whatever base with the let's say the Hunter base with some garbage base with the +1 to int. You Awakener Orb that onto the Redeemer Citrine amulet or whatever, and then you clean up the prefixes and suffixes that are not the influence mods, and you put just life and res and -2 total mana cost of skills, because the skeletons are very, very costly in terms of mana, so you definitely need that -10 to mana skills and -9 to total mana cost of skills. Otherwise you're gonna be starved for mana, even though I also run with a mana flask currently right now, which stops me from being frozen and chilled and so on. So this is a fairly simple amulet, and we are anointing Ravenous Horde on that because this gives us just a lot of movement and attack speed for our minions, which is really, really good. The next thing is the ring. The ring, I had to craft this one because there just wasn't one on the market. If we look at a ring with this much dex, which is unset ring, with minion damage, with curse on hit, this does not exist. Like this, it doesn't exist on the market. You pretty much have to craft this one for yourself. The way you do this is you spam the dexterity essence on it. So you spam the dexterity essence until you hit T1 minion damage, and that's all you need, which is a Redeemer mod. So you need an 84 unset ring, influenced by Redeemer. You spam the Dexterity Essence until you hit T1 minion damage, and then you basically craft the prefixes, which is like maximum life and mana cost of skills, which comes from the bench. And then on suffixes you can like augment fire, which will give you fire resistance, and then augment caster, which is guaranteed to give you frostbite on hit. If you get tier 2, you can remove caster, add caster until you get tier 1, and that's basically the ring. Very, very simple to craft. And then shield, which is much harder to craft and much more expensive. This shield is the ideal thing to wear when you are using Necromantic Aegis. Necromantic Aegis basically makes all of these bonuses apply to the minions instead of you, and as you can see, I do not have these charges. My minions have the frenzy and power charges from this. So there are 2 minimum frenzy charges and 2 minimum power charges, and the way you get both of them is you Awakener Orb together, like 2 shields, one with power charge, one with frenzy charge. You Awakener Orb them together on a base that is ideally Titanium Spirit Shield, which will give you some ES to your minions, and it will give 25% chance to block. Then you can, if you really want to, you can add influence modifiers, like you can do suffixes cannot be changed, so that the power charges stay, and then add influence modifiers until you hit the 1% increased damage per 1% chance to block attack damage, which is very, very expensive, and you can skip that step, and you can instead augment cold and augment chaos until you hit the increased cold damage, and also cold damage gained as extra chaos damage, and then you craft from the bench 5% chance to deal double damage. Very expensive shield, but extremely, extremely powerful. And then I think the last piece of gear we have is the belt, which is very simple. You could, I think the best way to do it is to probably craft with pristine fossils until you hit the T1 max life, like the percentage increased maximum life from the hunter, and T1 life, as well as the intimidating cry, and that's it. You could also do what I did and just hit the T1 life with intimidating cry, and then craft the life from the bench, or you can augment it later, and then all you need is resistances, so ideally like at least 40 of each resist on this. Lots of very specific gear, but of course this is something that you just gradually upgrade as you go, unless you want to do what I did and just never play this build until you invest 300x into it. Then we've got the jewel in here in this belt also, which is something that I really want to showcase. This is very, very simple to get and looks much harder to get than it is, because it has the T1 max roll life. It has the T1 physical damage, added physical damage, which is the best damage mod you can get on the prefix here. It has the strength and dex, which we need, and then it has T1 max roll attack speed. How do you get such an insane jewel? Very, very simple. You basically search for jewels that already have T1 life, so at least 36% life, and that already have strength or dex, right? And maybe you can find also some that have resistances, some that have minion speed, and you don't care about the other prefix, because the other prefix is going to be something that you harvest craft. The remove add phase are mods that you're not gonna need to craft any other piece of your gear, so the only thing that you can use them on is a jewel like this. I had like a random like tier, whatever, the worst chaos damage as a prefix here. I removed that, and I was doing remove like augment and remove add phase until I hit the T1 phase, and then you can do like reroll the value, like a divine for life, divine for speed, divine for phase, until you get good rolls on that, and you have an insane jewel that you can stick like 5 of those into your build, and you're gonna have a lot of damage coming from that and a lot of life. For the flasks, we're using just a life flask that removes bleed. We're using mana flask that removes freeze and chill. We're using bottled faith because this is like the most damage you can add from a flask, because it debuffs the enemies again, so you're not dealing damage yourself, it's your minions. Quicksilver that removes curses, and roomies just for some extra defense. Very simple flask setup. And then the other thing to craft are the cluster jewels. So You can save a lot of money by going for 11 passive jewels instead of 10 passive jewels. The way you craft these, like these are like the most damage you can get. So I still can improve these. I still should like reroll for attack speed. There is like 100% increased attack speed that I can still get on my build if I keep rerolling this. But basically, you want 2 large cluster jewels. You could go for a setup with 3 large cluster jewels by sacrificing some of these nodes and some of these nodes, and I guess not sure what else you'd sacrifice, but you'd have to sacrifice a lot. You could go for like a 3rd cluster jewel setup. I guess you'd sacrifice even more life, but I went for 2 cluster jewels, and these cluster jewels basically need to be 11 passives. I recommend 11 passives because you're gonna save like 8 exalts by going for 11 instead of 12, and those points can be allocated elsewhere. And you want them to be level 84. That's the difficult part, 84. And then you basically want to roll on them. Added small passive skills have 35% increased effect, and tier 1 life, which is at least 8 life. Once you roll that, you make sure to clean the suffixes, so like reforge an item keeping prefixes until you can remove the suffixes or modify them with harvest somehow. And then you do augment crit for guaranteed vicious bite, augment caster or augment speed for guaranteed increased attack and cast speed. And if you get it to tier 1, which is 3%, it actually is going to become 4%. So it's going to be 4% increased attack and cast speed on each of these little nodes, plus 13 life, plus 13 million increased minion damage, which is insane, plus the vicious bite. It's an insane jewel that you can craft like that. I still need to improve this one to get like 2% more attack and cast speed on each of these nodes. And then here I have to like remove chaos and augment speed or caster for the same thing here. Other than that, for the mediums, what you want is Vengeful Commander for hatred effect and Precise Commander for the crit and crit multi. Very, very simple. And for the extra stats, you are looking for all attributes and strength, all resistances. Like those are very, very important. Like even though it's just like 1 point here, 1 point here, and 1 point here, it's so much, like it's so important to actually get them. And you will pay like 1x more, like you will pay like 4x instead of 3x or something for something that has like +3 dex, +3 strength, or like 3 to all attributes and strength, or like increased chaos res and all res. But they are definitely worth it to pay that 1x because there's like no space elsewhere on the gear where you can fit that. And then the other medium that I have is the Megalomaniac, which I recommend finding something with lead by example and some like live or minion, or maybe one of like Precise Commander, Vengeful Commander. Any of those would be really, really good on this. And then for the small ones, I'm actually going for live for Fettle. So we got double Fettle here, and this also has some increased attributes, and this also has some chaos res and strength. So that's basically it when it comes to the cluster jewels. Other jewels that we're running are, in here we are running Fortress Covenant, which gives us 44% increased minion damage, and then also block and spell block for the minions. And the negative effects are nullified because we are putting it in the cluster jewels. So that's how you take care of the negative effects. They do not apply, but the jewel still works. Then we are using this jewel, which I should put like life on, but you can also use this like all res, or whatever res you need, minion damage, strength or strength and dex, and max life percentage. Those are pretty good as well. And then I'm using here Thread of Hope with -10 medium ring to grab the Necromantic Aegis and save 2 passive or 3 passive skill points here. 1, 2, 3, but we're putting 1 here. Yeah, so we're saving 2 passive skill points by using a Thread of Hope to connect this. That's how the passive skill tree looks like. We're picking up Whispers of Doom for the extra curse, and then another extra curse from the Windscream. We are anointing Ravenous Horde. We're picking extra skeleton here, extra skeleton and specter here. We got some leech. This leech is pretty important actually, because I don't think I have any other source of leech, but it's still good enough. And then mana reservation, some minion speed, some live, and the double damage nodes. If you need your if your minions are somehow dying, I have not had my minions die, so I didn't have that issue. I think out of all the endgame fights that I did, only on Uber Elder with Maven there, I had a Spectre die. That was something that happened once on Uber Elder with Maven. I had a Spectre die. So for that, I could pick like something like this for extra regen, extra elemental res, or I could pick something like this for extra physical mitigation. So this is like Indomitable Army, something like that is something like 3 points you could put in here or in here if you have trouble with your minions dying ever, but that should not be an issue. At least when you get to, at least when you have like all the levels on the gems. So I talked about the main skills. We talked about the debuffs, fitting the gems, gear, crafting, flask, cluster jewels, and passives. So that's basically it. In terms of the DPS, if I had to tell you how much the damage the build actually has, it would be very, very hard for me to tell you because the POB does not work properly for this. If I look at summon skeletons here, they recently added the skeleton archers. However, there are still things that are not counted correctly, I think. There's still like shock is not from scarebots, it's not being calculated. There are a bunch of things that are still not being counted correctly. This would show 3 million damage per skeleton, which means like 33 million damage coming from the skeletons. And then we would have, where are the specters? Race Spectre. Then we would have also like almost 3 million damage times 4 for the specters. A lot of millions of damage. Basically, you can see on the boss fights how insane this build is. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comments below or check out our Discord, or also check out my stream at Asmodeus Stream on Twitch TV, where I stream basically like 6 days a week, and we are going to be playing with this, killing all of the bosses and working on the next projects. Right now I'm gonna leave you with some footage of some bosses or mapping so that you can see this build better in action, and thank you guys for watching. See you next time.